we've got this bit of the lecture now starting. So we're live. So I'm just gonna make sure I got this all up here. Right. So okay, we are live. We're doing Doggerland tonight, and obviously I would like us to see if there's any news from anybody. So who's going to start off with the news tonight? Do you know what we're going to do? Because we never hear from Henry, right? And you know, Henry, can I just say you made a massive contribution to my lecture last week?
Yeah.
But you weren't here.
No.
No, because you told me it wasn't on.
Oh no. You did.
Oh God! I actually did send you a message to say it was on.
You said it was off.
Oh, it was my mistake. I put on Archaeology Cymru. I said we were having a break for a week, and then Carl told me that we'll be on next. We will be on next.
Anyway, don't worry, Henry. And we talked a lot about Ireland last week, so
That must have been a short program then.
Oh
no,
yeah,
it went on a fair. It went on a fair bit, Henry. So anything you want to say this week, darling?
They've discovered pottery in Israel that's 3,500 years old, and it's linked to opium use.
No,
I thought that'd be right up your street.
Now, come on, that's just not on.
Would you and pirates? It will be handy.
Yeah, well, actually, I do say to people when I am being a pirate, I do say that pirates used to like their cheese and their rum and all these other things, and obviously it's not all about gold. So give me that date. This has been found in Israel.
Yes.
Nice. I no doubt you'll send that over to me so we can have a little bit of a draw on that next week.
Yeah.
Roger, anything you'd like to say, darling?
There was something that came up in the archaeology. Is it current archaeology?
Okay, go on.
An article on what they're calling a hill fort. It's a very small one in North Wales. A place called Dinlle, D-I-N-L-L-E, 25 kilometers south of it, where they're finding that this, it's like a camp almost, not quite oblong, but they found roundhouses in it. And the thing was, the bases they got in substantial stone, which was a surprise. So it's an article on that saying that this totally unexpected, and it's wearing away. It's on the coastline.
Yeah.
One of those things you were on about the other week, where it's being weathered away, and they just got the edge there with the remnants of the stone base, quite big to look at. On that side, it's being washed away slowly. So I don't know if you ever come across that.
Yeah, Dinlle. It's basically they've been doing excavations there. That's right.
That's right. Yeah, they're back there. Yeah. So that was interesting. But the shape of what they call a hill fort was a bit strange to me. It's on a slight, a higher section of rock with this sort of a boundary mound or wall around it, but no, what I'd call there is a ditch there. There's one ditch showing, not very deep now, but there's one ditch and that's it, univalid. So that was it. So I don't know if that's particular, that important. It's not a big site, but it's strange because of the roundhouses they found there, a couple of them, saying that they were quite unexpected.
It'd be good to get more of an idea on dates for that, to be honest with you, Roger, because you know, the one thing that we're doing in regards to the Mesolithic period, I've been saying to my gang on a Tuesday night, I said I don't want to move on to the Neolithic period yet. Because we've been learning so much about the Mesolithic period, it's been a revelation to learn about this wonderful Mesolithic period with all the new stuff out there. And as I say, I'm loath to move on
It's
because
just an interest point rather than direct on the
Yeah.
course. I know, but it was totally unexpected, and the roundhouse feature was interesting. And I thought, well, I could send you a copy if you want.
oh yeah, no, that love it. Love it. Right, Richard, anything you'd like to say, darling? Well, he doesn't seem to want to say anything, Richard,
He's a
today.
myth.
He just
He's a myth. he's mute.
Ah,
Richard's a mute.
yeah, no, nothing. Nothing to add this week. There's nothing.
That's not very nice on saying Richard's a mute.
No, I said he's myth. He's a myth.
He's not a myth. Oh, shut up, you. Right. Anyway. And the last one to ask now is Bill.
I
What?
went to St. Fagans. Did you see my post?
No,
I
I
saw Llewellyn. There's a.
Oh yeah.
Have you been? You must
Yeah,
know.
you saw the head of Llewellyn. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I went to see Llewellyn's court. So I done
Exactly.
what I wanted to do, and I was very impressed with the new galleries. You know, the social history, but also this. You know, they've got some stuff from the museum. You know, Cardiff Museum. They've transferred some of the natural history and put it in with the St. Fagans stuff. You know. So there's stones there, and
So in other words, and National Museum at St. Fagans is well worth a visit. So
yes, it is.
thank
yes.
you. Thank
And
you.
the Vulcan
What I'm going
pub.
to do,
The Vulcan
what's
pub
that?
is nearly built.
well, me and Bill are going now when it's open. I got to buy Bill a pint. Right, Bill, talking about Bill, anything you would like to say, because we've got to crack on.
No, carry on.
Right, okay. I'm just going to give me 30 seconds. Right, I'm just going to get something to drink, and I'm going to get cracking. Hang on, give me 30 seconds. Hang on.
1, 2, 3.
Oh my bloody God, it's snowing.
What?
It's
What?
fucking snowing.
It's raining.
No, it's snowing.
Snowing? What?
There's snow coming down.
Oh,
Oh my God. I can't believe it. It's freaking snowing.
No, that's ash from the old building that's burning down.
Shut up, you.
Are you sure?
Oh, can you see it? God, I don't know. Right, anyway, cracking
Turn
on. Right,
picture
shut up.
around.
Right, it's only a bit of bloody snow. We've had snow at this time of year before. So anyway, right, okay. I want us to look at Doggerland tonight, and it's going to be in 2 parts. So don't get upset if I don't cover everything, because I'm not going to cover everything with Doggerland. We've got to look at some new perspectives with Doggerland, and we've got to just do some of the dross and just do some of the other stuff. And if I can get even near my excitement that I had on Tuesday, right, this is going to be great. So what I need to do, I need to, by the way, we'll have our break at 8 o'clock. And I'm going to crack on all the way till then. I know Bill's got to leave us, but that's Bill. And if Richard needs to leave us, he needs to say, I gotta go. Anyway, so Doggerland. Now we visited this in, I would say, right. First things first, when we did the Paleolithic period, I did mention Doggerland. I mentioned Doggerland a fair bit, but we didn't really look at it as a specific topic. I know in my other lectures over the years, we have actually mentioned Doggerland in at least 2 other lectures. But today, Doggerland is very, very relevant because it's within our Mesolithic period. And guess what? It marks the end of our Mesolithic period. We looked at the Bull na Cliff site, which is 18 meters below water level now, off the northwestern coast of the Isle of Wight. But back then, it would have been a thriving settlement, a thriving vista of a landscape within the Mesolithic world. And one of the things that I remember from looking at that site was that archaeologists are going along with what I've been saying. And in fact, they've made a better argument than me, that in fact, the flooding of Doggerland is the end of the Mesolithic period. It's definitely the end of the Mesolithic period.
Karl, is this about 4,500 years ago, is it?
8,500, 8,000 years ago, yeah. Sorry, Rod.
No,
8,500, 8,000 years ago is the end of the Mesolithic period. In lots of the textbooks, it doesn't say the Mesolithic period ends until about 6,000 years ago. But now scientists and other archaeologists, and including myself, we're now seeing what makes the end of the Mesolithic period is as follows. By losing the land bridge with Europe, that marks us being isolated as an island, but that's not good enough. What we do see as the end of the Mesolithic period is mass agriculture coming in, and what we do actually see is certain evidence of certain crops being planted just before Britain is disconnected from Europe as an island. And obviously, as we know, the Neolithic period, the Neolithic revolution, the revolution of agriculture, bingo, it's already started. So that's the end of our Mesolithic period. This is the evidence that we see at Boulder Cliff, just before Boulder Cliff is inundated by water. This map itself that you can see on your screen, if we zoom in on it, is not the one I would usually go for, because I would usually say that this wood channel here, this was mainly land as well. And the reason why and you see it in another map as well, in one of the other maps on here, it actually clearly says that the channel there is covered in land. But this is other people's interpretation, not just mine. And the reason why I say a proof le recondre for the channel itself being land is because those trees managed to spread across Britain quite rapidly over that 1,000 years, between 12 and 11,000 years ago. And there must have been more access for trees of wooded and forested landscape. That's one of the big arguments that I've got. And in fact, Clement Reid, the guy who we've mentioned a few times in the past, but not recently, Clement Reid would argue that obviously where the channel there, and where you've got the Thames, and where you've got above the Ouse River, you've got large tracts of trees that go underneath the water all the way over to Denmark and the Netherlands. And also this map argues against me saying that roughly 9,000 years ago Ireland was connected to mainland Britain, but in fact another map actually does show 9,000 years ago that Ireland was connected to mainland Britain. But what we're interested in is the flooding and loss of Doggerland without the academic scruples, lack of scruples that we've been talking about. So the dates for the loss of Doggerland range between 8,500 years ago and 8,000 years ago. But what do we say? Dates are not really important. What is important is the change in everything. So Dogger Hills, Doggerland Bight, just below the Wood Hills, and heading over to the landmass of Denmark. That's our Doggerland Bight, Dogger Hills, and hence being known as the Dogger littoral, or the Dogger landscape. So what we do find is geological surveys have suggested that Doggerland stretched more extensively than as illustrated on this map. And what we do find is the evidence of Doggerland has been extensively archived and recorded well before any British archaeologists cared to do so. actually, Clement Reid, the antiquarian, geographer, geologist, and so on, in 1913 came up with his book Submerged Forests, and Submerged Forests was derided, was dismissed as a work of an absolute lunatic, right? And that's not much of an exaggeration. But Clement Reid's book now is a Bible for archaeologists looking at Doggerland. Clement Reid came out with the book at the wrong time. Within a year, Britain would be at war with Germany. And unfortunately, people were still looking at his book and saying, well, you know, Clement Reid saying that there was a woodland of forest that stretched from Great Britain all the way over to continental Europe. When 1914 came in, they said, right, burn Clement Reid's books because we don't want anyone to think in the British populace that we were ever linked with Europe. We were never linked with Europe. We've always been an island, right? And this idea that Clement Reid came up with was really derided. And that's the reason, because of the war. If the war had never happened, which if I went back in time, I would come up with an idea of not having the First World War. You'd never have had a Second World War, and many things in the world would never have happened. And Clement Reid would be a hero. And in fact, what we thought about Doggerland would have come more to the forefront before, because the Danish and the archaeologists from the Netherlands were already telling us about it, but nobody wanted to know. People in Britain said, no, we were never linked to Europe. No, never happened. And in fact, we really weren't taking this idea of these submerged woodlands and forests seriously until the end of the 1980s, early 1990s, even though, folks, you could go on the west coast and you could go on the south west coast of Wales. You could go up to North Wales. You could go off Goldsland Cliff. You could go inland to Major. You get evidence from Barry as well back in the early 1890s, 1895. You could know that these forests existed, but no, they never did. But they're over there. Nope, they're not there. Not there. There was tree stumps being dredged up in the River Thames. No, they're nothing to do. They don't exist, right? People would not want to look at the evidence. In fact, people started to think that fairies put these tree stumps there to confuse people. You know, there was all the excuses made not to believe that Doggerland existed. So one of the things that we've got to say is the great tidal wave of the Storiga tsunami. It's not a tsunami, it's a great tidal wave, which occurred sometime around 8,500 years ago. We'll mention that later on. And we might mention it a little bit in a few weeks' time as well. So Doggerland was so named not after people meeting people in car parks, doggers. It wasn't named after anything like that. Doggerland was named after Doggerland Bank, which was subsequently named after doggers, which were Dutch fishing boats that existed in the 1600s. Those doggers were some of the similar vessels that were involved in the Spanish and English armadas. However, hence why those Dutch fishermen were going out there in their doggers, and hence the name Dogger Hills, Doggerland Bight, and so on. So this hypothetical map is very different from one or two of the other maps that we're going to actually look at today. So what we're going to do, we're going to move on. These ones, I prefer this one here because it's a little bit more going on. I like this one. And then that date there, I found out subsequently that date should actually read 6,500 years BC and not 5,500 years BC. It's a printing error, which is quite a shame, really, because that's from an academic work. I'm sorry to bore you, Anne. The archaeological potential of the area was first identified in the 1900s, and interest intensified in 1931 when a fishing trawler operating east of the Wash. So there we go. Let's get the Wash there. There we go. There's the wash. There it is with a little river leading there. You got a little bit of a wash there. 1931, rather interestingly enough, there was a lot of trawling, right? And they were bringing up tree stumps, they were bringing up antlers, they were bringing up human remains. All these things were being dredged in, right? And things had been dredged up for a long time, but now in 1930s was the time that some people become interested, but it was still dismissed, right? And it would be dismissed again because we're going to war with Germany. So in other words, the archaeologists studying this were not really being funded, right? The idea that we were ever connected to Britain was something that wasn't going to be very popular in the 1930s either. Again, it took a long time. And one thing that was trawled up in particularly that ended up in the Hull Museum, and unfortunately in 1941 the Hull Museum took a direct hit, and all the artifacts which were associated with Doggerland went up in an inferno. There was a bombing raid from Norway. We didn't expect a bombing raid from Norway in 1941, but we did have a bombing raid from Norway in 1941. And unfortunately, Hull Museum went up without the artifacts being saved. And in fact, people metal detecting on the remains of Hull Museum were coming up with Roman coins up until the 1980s, when people realized that most of the artifacts have either been destroyed or some of the metal artifacts are still there, but that's another story altogether. So what was actually trawled up was a big chunk of peat, right? And in that big chunk of peat was a barbed antler point, basically a bit of reindeer with barbs on it, which had been carved into the antler. And that was believed to be Mesolithic in date. Now, if that was Mesolithic in date, how was it found in a chunk of peat which was trawled up some miles away from the coast? And people started to say, well, if the peats come from the sea bottom and there's human remains in it in the form of artifacts that we've created in the peat, then that must mean that the peat was formed as the water levels was rising and the trees had already been killed off. Hence, there must have been trees out there at some time. At the time that this antler point was found, roughly 10,000 years ago, therefore, there was a land bridge between Great Britain and Europe. Unfortunately, any discussion of this was pushed under the carpet, because now we've got to deal with Adolf Hitler, the 1st of September 1939, and it was to be dismissed as evidence. Bill, have you got to go now?
Yeah, I've got to say cheerio then. Thanks, Carl.
See you, Bill.
Cheers,
Yeah.
everyone.
It's been
See
a
you next
pleasure.
week.
We'll see you next week, darling. Take care. Take care. That's a shame about Bill, because I know he would have liked this lecture, which he must have been enjoying. But what we've got is that also the other thing, right? This is something else as well. Think about what I've just said. Somebody's found a big chunk of peat, right? It's evidence of the Mesolithic period. People were living out there when the water that you saw in the 1930s was actually dry land. And obviously there were trees and people hunting and all that stuff. But there was something else that they were actually finding as well. Not only were they finding the remains of mammoths, which would be understandable, being a landscape full of trees and all the rest of it, they also came across the remains of other animals, and some animals that like warm weather conditions, and a few other prehistoric tools and weapons, and actually earlier bones that must come from the remains of Neanderthals, right? Forget the Neanderthals a minute, or forget the Neanderthals until a while, but they were actually finding the remains of lions. Right, okay, let's just work this out. Lions wouldn't have lived within a tundra landscape with the peat alongside human beings when the ice was melting 12,000 years ago. So that must indicate that these bones from lions existed from another period when the landscape that we're trying to see was full of trees. They lived when the landscape was warmer.
Yeah.
When it and the thing is, they started to realize that there were layers upon layers of archaeological evidence, times when the Sea of Doggerland was no longer a sea, was in fact dry land. So all of this pointed to evidence that unfortunately was not allowed to come to the light of day until many, many years later. And actually, I will say it as it is, right? Who's really interested in prehistoric Britain back then, when in fact people were more interested in the Roman period, for example? That's me being a bit sort of patronizing.
Yeah.
So, Anne, you want to say something? Go for it, Anne. Get down for those nipples and tell us.
No, that's a good point. You know, I don't. I think people have always been interested in Romans, and you know, it's overshadowed every other period, really.
Exactly.
This
is amazing. It is amazing.
Amazing, especially when you think that they were lion's bones, and you know the fact that it really was. We did have a really warm climate, hot climate.
And this was thousands of years before. This was thousands of years before Doggerland.
Yeah.
And so this made things very complicated. And Anne's got a point, and we mentioned the Romans as well. What happened was in the 1930s, any money that was available was going into archaeological excavations, which were being undertaken by the likes of Sir Mortimer Wheeler and Lady Wheeler on sites like Maiden Castle, on sites like Silchester, on Roman sites, on for example, St. Albans Verulamium was actually being excavated by Lady Wheeler, but that was a Roman site. So, you know, people are really interested in Roman stuff. There were other people coming up in the ranks, but obviously Roman stuff wasn't. There was Gordon Child, for example, excavating on Orkney in the late 1920s, early 1930s. But the problem is, it was not. Most people weren't really interested in prehistoric stuff, and definitely not tree stumps. But this tree stump stuff for me is absolutely amazing and absolutely fascinating. So here we go, cracking on. As of 2020, international teams have continued investigations into the submerged landscape of Doggerland using new and traditional archaeogeophysical techniques. So basically, this is using a geophysical instrument that's dragged beyond the boats, and obviously it records things and sort of the landscape of the sea floor. So we've got computer simulations. Evidence gathered allows study of past environments, ecological change, and human transition from hunter-gatherer to farming communities. What I'm going to start is to bring in another concept, another idea, right? Because I make it really dramatic, right? You're thinking about Doggerland, right? And as the water level's rising between 12,000 years ago and 8,500 years ago, the rise in water level is only slight year by year. But if you were lucky to live 40, 50, 60 years, what you would see in that 40, 50, 60 years is a massive change in the coastal landscape. So in other words, say for example, you lived over there by the beach, right? Or you lived on the seashore within this Doggerland landscape. After 50, 60 years have gone by, that place where you lived is a meter under the water, or maybe even deeper under the water. The little bits of wood that might be sticking out after 40, 50 years are way out there. And you're going to think, oh my God, this is like a major change. But you're only going to see a major change over that length of time. Now, what happened then? This is something that we really talked about yesterday, and we really got into it, and I'm going to prepare you for it for when we get to it. When approximately, okay, if we look there, it's described as a tsunami. What there is and there's the Riga landslide underwater causes an absolutely massive wave, right? Now, the word tsunami is when you think about the Boxing Day tsunami of 2004. In that Boxing Day tsunami of 2004, what happens is that that there's the water goes out, and then there's this absolute massive tidal wave, right? And then it comes back in. That's a tsunami, right? But in this case, people had no preparation. There was this wall of water coming towards them that may have been 5 meters tall, even 2 meters, right? Anyone in its path would die. Any animal in its path would die. Any building would be destroyed. We've got evidence in Scotland that that this great wave headed inland up to 18-20 miles from the existing coastline. In other words, this tsunami was so catastrophic that tens of thousands of people, millions of animals died within a moment. Now, one thing I've got to say is up until that point, the land was being consumed by the sea, but over, not noticeable over a year, but noticeable over a generation, right? The event of 8,500 years ago was so dramatic that humanity had to begin again. And when humanity has to begin again, we have a habit of reinventing things. We have a habit of doing things even better. We've got the survival instinct. When a human being's dumped in the middle of nowhere, you'll be surprised what a human being is what a human being's capable of, right? In my case, for example, I'm going to be putting the roofs on a building next week, right? A building that I built from scratch, that up until 8 months ago was nothing more than a load of poles sticking up in the middle of a field. Now, I wouldn't have been capable of doing that 3 years ago, but when you need to, you get on doing things. And what I'm trying to say is that this event of 8,500 years ago spurred on our Neolithic period. It made us so innovational that we really didn't need people from Europe. We were able to do what we needed to do. And it's a bit like the Irish mindset. The Irish were able to create people when in mainland Britain, we were just still burying them. What's going on with the Irish cremating people? All these different things come into play. Anyway, moving on. So what we do know is that Britain has moved from cold periods to warm periods, cold periods to warm periods, up until 12,000 years ago. There were periods when Britain was approximately 1,500 years ago. Britain was actually, alongside Doggerland, was associated with a warm climate, i.e., the lion's bones. There's lots of things that can say, but one thing I will say is this: the British consciousness, the British mind for having a fear of the sea, was brought out in these events, was brought about by these events. The only people that survived the flooding of Doggerland were people who happened to be on the upland areas at that time. When they looked out, they saw the entire world disappear forever. And this is the difference, right? There's 2 points here. And this is, if nobody can interrupt now at this point, because there's 2 major points to be made, right? And then we'll stop, and then we'll come back to this, right? When you think about the Gilgamesh, and we think about Noah's Ark, and you think about all the flood legends of the Middle East, right? For example, Noah's Ark is meant to be built up on the top of a hill, or the concept of surviving the flood is to go up to the upland areas as high as you can go, because standing on top of a hill is not enough. Because when you've got a tidal wave, the tidal wave doesn't stop, as we see with the archaeological evidence of Palacastro, which was the destruction of Palacastro site, which was wiped out by the tsunami associated with Thera in the year 1628 years BC. That we're told about the flood of Palacastro, just the evidence kept, the water kept going. That's a tsunami, right? That's a tsunami. The other thing as well is a tsunami is typically an event that when the water goes out and the water comes back in, then the water goes back out, then you can recover your land. The land was never recoverable. They never ever recovered the landscape. In other words, it was lost forever. And I got to be honest with you, that event, that in human consciousness, must have been so devastating that it stayed with us even today. You know, we think about, okay, if you want to get political, just go get political, right? I want to say this in a different way. We've got a fear of the English Channel. Not because we think migrants are going to come over, not because people on the opposite side of French or German, right? We've got a fear that that's going to happen again. We've got a fear that there's going to be a tidal wave. It's in our minds. It's in our avoidance. And it's absolute mad that we've got our major city in Britain, London, along a flood margin. And it would only take a great tidal wave event and London will never, ever be recoverable again. I've said my piece.
Yeah.
So when this event created what we've got today as the sense of Great Britain, and if we look at that map there, I think the point of the other one is this little map here. Even now, you can start to see the shape of Britain creating itself, right? So if we go back to oh, hang on a minute. I use these ones on you, and if we go to there, if you can see, if you take away this bit of land between Great Britain, and you've got the Rhine and the Seine and all the rest of it going here, and you've got a little bit of a lake there. If you take all that away, and you take away the land bridge between Ireland and Great Britain, you can clearly see the land bridge there on this one. This one's got the land bridge between Great Britain and Ireland just before 8,500 years ago. And then you chuck in the water in the Bristol Channel. The shape of Britain is almost there. And it only needs to take about another 2,000 years, and more or less the shape of Britain as we understand it today has been created. Even the islands of the inner and outer Hebrides have now got water around them 6,000 years ago. Even the land between Inverness and Orkney, there's water around this landscape. So in other words, this event shaped us. It became us. It is us. We own it. We are now an island forever. You know, it's we talk about, I'm going to mention this, we talk about creating a land bridge between a bridge. Wasn't it I'm not going to say the politician Boris Johnson, but I think he discussed building a bridge of 25 miles in length between Great Britain and mainland Europe. And it's not, we don't really care about being connected to Europe. It's just the stuff in the middle. It's the water. That's what we fear. That's what we fear the most. We fear the water, not Europe. We fear the water. So this is a point. Now, during what we do see with this landscape, so there are some estimates, and I can't even get my mind around this. When I talk about 100 meters water rising between 12,000 years ago and maybe 6,000 years ago, some people believe that the water level rose 120 meters. Yeah. And I can't get my mind around that. And what I want to do, and this is what we did on Tuesday, okay? If you think about that tidal wave 8,500 years ago, only being 2 meters high, that would be quite something because it's taller than us. If it's 3 meters high, it's taller than us. If it's 10 meters high, that would be so terrifying. Water level.
Yeah, it would have been terrifying.
You would have been terrified, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this tidal wave is 100 meters high. What I'm saying, between 12,000 years ago and 6,000 years ago, the water level rose 100 meters. Some say up to 120 meters. That's okay. Let's just try and work out the rising water level between 12,000 and 6,000 years ago. Let's try and work that out. If you look at the cliff line along the South Wales coast, most of it is only 20 meters in height. It's not 100 meters in height. It's 20 meters in height. Yeah. Think of the water level rising over that period of time, 12,000, 6,000 years ago, or just 8,000 years ago, depending on which one you want to look at. 100 meters. That's 5 of our cliff lines along. That's a lot of water. Trying to get our mind into that is not easy. It's really, really not.
It's a bit, it is scary because, you know, if we're looking at 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, and now we look at our, our island now, yeah. I suppose you've got to admit that it is going to change. It is going to keep changing, isn't it? But it's how quickly it changes in the future. That's the problem we've got now, isn't it?
But I'm gonna say something that lots of politicians wouldn't like me to say. This is a natural phenomenon. The rising of the water level has been something that's been going on for a long time. Yeah. However, it's been going on very slowly, and it's just. I think when we think about this whole thing, and we think about the idea of loss, and how much we could learn from looking at the Doggerland, right? And what we're going to do, right? I want to show you something that blew my mind. On Tuesday, I come across it by complete accident, right? It's this. Now. This is
Are they going to put nuclear power in there? Nuclear?
No, hang on. This is
Caisson.
Yes. And yeah. We're gonna leave this there a moment, right? Because one of the things that keep that there. We're going to explain what this is in a moment. One of the things that the Danish archaeologists have been doing, they've been going out diving from their coastline, excavating on the sea floor, maybe 5 meters deep, 10 meters deep, maybe not too much more than that, because it can get quite choppy. They've got different waters around Denmark, and they've been actually doing this off the coast of the Netherlands and the rest of the coast as well. But now, what we've seen when they're actually building bridges across these expanses, what they do, they make these movable, as Roger said, caissons, right? And in fact, these have actually, this is something. In the Second World War, they had something called Mulberry Harbours. And what they were, when D-Day was happening on the 6th of June, they built these little concrete harbours, right? And what you did, you towed them out, not concrete harbours, concrete quays, which would create harbours. Got there. What they did, they had these concrete caissons, these concrete quays, these concrete artificial harbours. And they were dotted around our coastline before the 6th of June. And by about July, we had moved these caissons over to France, and we had harbours. Right, we didn't need to capture Calais or Boulogne, right? We just moved these harbours out, and we created natural harbours, right? Caissons, Roger's right, caissons. So moving that point on, right? Moving that point on, if you, as you're building, right, and you're going to build a pier for a bridge, they've done this on the Gulf of Corinth with building the bridge piers for some of the bridge in the Gulf of Corinth in Greece. What you do, you move these onto the seabed, right? You pump all the water out of them, and then archaeologists can now go down onto the seabed and excavate. And that's exactly what they've been doing. They've been going out excavating the seabed. They've been doing this with pipelines. We've been excavating the seabed, and we've been saying, "Oh, right, there's a Mesolithic building here on the seabed, which is 20 meters down. We're excavating it. We're getting the data, and then they're carrying on with the development." So, in other words, we have now got the ability to excavate the seabed by using this technology, and I think that is absolutely amazing. It's amazing we've got the ability to do that. And when I was looking into this, there was this academic. He had also all other proposals to excavate on the seabed. Now, this is only practical near the shoreline, not sort of when it gets like down to 30, 40, 50 meters deep, it gets a bit troublesome. And chucking one of these out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, right, or the North Sea. Let's talk about the North Sea, where it's going to bob up and down. And somebody said, what you do, you get a load of caissons, you chuck them out at sea, right? And the other caissons counteract the movement of the caisson in the middle, and you can excavate on the sea bottom. But unfortunately, that would need millions and millions of pounds. Except we've got the ability. The thing is that this is the point about some of these developments. They've got to do this to work out the infrastructure to get the pier. So you chuck in the archaeologists, do the work they need to, and you start, because they've already started doing it. They've already started pile driving here. All the archaeology work's been done. They started pile driving, and what they are then doing, right, is that they pour concrete, and then everything else happens, right? So it's great that we've got the technology. So in other words, what we are doing, we're praising Clement Reid, and we're basically saying, thank you, Clement Reid. Everything that you said, we've actually got the landscape, the surface of all those settlements on all the archaeology out there. Thank you very much. And this is what we're getting. So evidence including the contours of the present seabed, we're seeing that the evidence including the contours of the present seabed are now being surveyed in many, many different ways using many, many techniques. So what we are seeing, if we go back to where we were a few moments ago, right, back to this, and what they are doing, if we move away from that a moment, they're able to do surveys. They're undertaking surveys. This is called the North Sea Paleo Landscape Project, right? And they were able to have surveys and understand where all little river systems are, understand, well, those are upland areas, those are lowland areas, those are where there used to be lakes. Up there on the top hand side, that's actually the Doggerland bank itself. So what we're actually able to see is where all the rivers and all the other earlier landscape used to be. We've got lagoons. Now, there's a point I want to make, which is which I did on Tuesday, which comes at the end of this, right? And I made it more tragic on Tuesday. I'm probably not going to be able to succeed now. But what we do, we go back to. Let's just go back to this. Let's just chuck that in there, right? Let's just look at if you got Doggerland Bank there, right? Let's just sit on the edge of that yellow bit there, above the letter N. Let's just sit there, right? You're looking out. This is just before things go really bad. You're looking out there, and what you can see is lagoons, salt marshes, mud flats, people's homes, trees, various grasses for grazing animals, beaches, inland streams, rivers, marshes, lakes, somebody smiling at you as they go past, reindeers. In fact, the Garden of Eden In fact, this landscape is so rich that we do believe that tens of thousands of people live there. It may have been one of the richest hunting, fowling, and fishing grounds ever known in Europe. This was the place that technology and everything that we had evolved.
Gosh.
Let's just use the word Atlantis, right? But don't get too excited. I'm not going to go into a Van Daniken thing, right? Let's think about all the fables that Plato said about Atlantis in the Aegean. He said that Atlantis had temples, it had civilization, it had everything that people wanted at Atlantis, right? Take that thought, take the technology slightly different, but think about that. And think about what happened to Atlantis. And think about what was lost. And bring that your mind thousands of years before the Atlantis legend, right? And bring it to here. Think about, it's quite possible, and I've never said this before, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to do a punt. I'm going to do a prediction. Some people might be arguing in years' time that Doggerland, the technology that was developed on Doggerland, was something that we wouldn't see for a few more thousand years. Let's think about Doggerland being so rich that they had technologies that we can only dream about. Let's think about a lost world. Let's take this even further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get an image, and I'm going to try and get ourselves into this place. This is why I couldn't do Doggerland in one lecture. I wasn't going to do this today, but we're going to go take this even deeper. Doggerland landscape. Let's just try and get an image. Let's just try and get the image that I need to try and picture, to try and get into that place. Okay, let's just, I just want to grab an image. I wasn't meant to do this. Okay, that'll do. That'll do, you're there. You're looking out at this beautiful landscape. Everything is there. And then one moment, you've got a tidal wave coming towards you, and everything has been lost in an instant. Everything that you ever believed, everything that you would be is wiped out in a moment. There would be nobody able to survive that. Everything is drowned, everything is lost. So when we think about Noah's flood, this was one of the most catastrophic events that humanity has ever seen. This was far greater than Krakatoa. This was far greater than the loss of the Minoan world and all the civilizations in the Mediterranean. This was far greater than anything that this planet has ever seen. When we think about the pandemic and COVID, that was nothing. That was a walk in the park. If we think about the loss of people's lives in the Second World War, 50, 60 million people. Obviously 60 million people weren't lost on Doggerland. But if you look at the proportion of the people that were living in Europe at that time, you're looking at a wipeout event of every single person on Doggerland. Every single person went, disappeared, lost. And you know, one thing I'm gonna say, I've got something wrong in all my estimations. I'm gonna say I got one thing wrong in every single lecture that I've done about Doggerland. What I've said in the past, I'm going to admit I've got this wrong, right? What I've said in the past is that I've said that when this great flood event happened, Dogger Bank was an island where people were trapped. It wasn't an island where people were trapped because they were all dead. They were all wiped out. Every single animal, everything that lived there, every single tree, everything was wiped out. Nothing survived. Just think about that. This is humanity that's wiped out. They talk about, I'm not being over dramatic here. It makes more sense than you think.
Well,
And hang on, Anne, it makes more sense than you think. We've got evidence that this great tidal wave went 20 odd meters into the existing coast of northern Scotland, which is Grampian upland areas, through Aberdeen, right? Through that landscape, all the way through Inverness, the entire thing, absolutely everything, right? Even people in upland areas didn't survive. There's no chance of survival at Doggerland. There's no chance at all. Anne, make your point.
no, I just think this is where all the myths, the myths come from. Myths are based on fact, reality, really.
Yes, they are. Where there's a myth and a legend, there's a fact waiting to be told. Yes.
Yeah. So, Noah's Ark, that was ours. Gilgamesh was the Middle East. We've all, yes, this is where our fear of water comes from. Are these sort of stories, of being swamped, being swallowed up. And
exactly,
it did happen. Yeah, it does happen. It does happen, and it could happen again.
Nothing like this has ever been seen.
No.
There's that film that was made a few years ago, which is used as a teaching aid in school, The Day After Tomorrow, right? This wasn't the day after tomorrow. There was no tomorrow. Tomorrow didn't exist.
So really, it's like a complete, it's like you say, the end of the Mesolithic era completely wiped out, really, that certain area of the world, was just
exactly
wiped out.
exactly.
So whatever came after was amazing, really.
Was amazing, and this is the thing: people's ingenuity, people's ability to carry on, those that survived. Do you know what? I jumped the gun, but I'm going to say it. If smack bang in the middle of the Grampians in Scotland, just south of Inverness, we were looking at a few sites. Oh God, it's in my head. Khan something. The Cairngorms. That's it. In the Cairngorms, we found archaeological evidence in the Cairngorms, and it was Mesolithic evidence. And people thought, why are we finding? Why are we finding? How are we finding archaeological evidence in the Cairngorms? How are we finding it? Right, and we're finding it because these are the people that survived.
Yeah.
These are the only people that survived.
Oh, really?
These are the people that tell us the story. These are the people. These are the people that these people in the Cairngorms, right? They looked out and they saw the tidal wave, right? They couldn't outrun it, but they were lucky because they were high enough. They saw it. Right? The world was very different then. And there's another thing as well, is right. And this is quite dramatic. This is hugely dramatic, right? And I'm going to say it. And I only sort of realized this on Tuesday, and I'm realizing it more than anything now. We've gone through theory upon theory about trees. We've talked about people living up trees. We've talked about people clearing trees. We thought about this. We thought about that. Right? It's likely, not likely. I can tell you, it's a dead cert. Knowing what we know from the 20th of January 1606, that tsunami, that the water stayed on the land for months upon months. It did not go out, right? And the land of Wentlug levels was bereft of trees forever, because the land would all the plants were killed off because of the salt water. Yeah. This event itself would have created a blanket of salty water across the land So obviously the bits of Scotland that did actually recover, right, and the bits of Norfolk that did actually recover, the bits of the south coast that did recover, and the bits of Northumberland, all these places that did recover, right? The land would have been poisoned by salt water for month after month after month. Yeah. Therefore, the answer to the loss of trees is down to this event, not because of humans felling the trees. The trees were already dead. The trees, it was a catastrophe for everything. In fact, humans could wander across bereft landscapes with nothing lived. This was worse than a nuclear holocaust. Nothing grew, nothing lived, everything was dead. It took generations for the ground level, because right, when you, this is a thing, trees, when they rot down, they create the conditions for soil, and then that soil creates conditions for other plants to grow. The flora, the biodiversity of the landscape is there. But if the trees are dead and all the stuff falling down to the ground falls into brackish, salty water, a soil level is not going to be conducive to growing plants for a long time. So we see it would have been, I'm actually surprised that civilization managed to survive this. I'm surprised. It begs that sort of sense of, how did this happen? How were we able to? And the other thing as well is, let's talk about Europe again. Without the link to Europe, we were on our own. I'm going to use a terminology that my dad uses, right? Which is in context. We were on our arse, right? And that is the right context. We were on our arse. We had, and in fact, the other thing that we got to think of, right? And this is something that I've not said before. Our coastline is affected exactly the same way as northern France is affected, exactly the same way as Denmark, exactly the same way as the Low Countries. All of these would have been hit by that same wave. Their landscape would have been destroyed. Would they have wanted to come over to Britain? Would they have not? There was no. The coastal margins would have been inaccessible. So we think about us. We think about selfish us Britons. We think about us and me all the time. But what we've also got to think is, this happened to them. This happened to the continent. People on both sides of the channel had to evolve. They had to survive, and they had to get that instinct. They had to get out there. So again, looking at this plan, the large river systems, we know about them, and we know about these systems because of the money that's been placed into this survey project, known as the North Sea Paleo Landscape Project, the 3D seismic survey, so that we can actually understand the landscape before it's so developed. By, you know, there's fracking projects. I do believe you could do underwater fracking. I think you can. The oil industry and all these other projects to put pipelines and all the rest of it, they need to do these surveys to see what's there. And in doing so, we've got maps of the landscape, which is great. So archaeology, geologists are all working together. So we've got these maps. There's our Dogger Bank, the Dogger Hills, the Dogger Bank. That's all in one. Now, there's another story about this, right?
We didn't have a break.
Oh, do we? Oh, okay, we're gonna have a 5-minute break. I wanted to get into this. Right, okay, I don't want a long break, guys. You get a 5-minute break, right? 5-minute break. I want to get back into it, because actually this is a good place to have a break, because I got that in my head. Have a break, guys. 5 minutes, no more. I'm gonna have a cup of tea.
Right.
I'm going to have to leave you, Carl.
What?
Oh, No, you can't leave us, Richard. You're not
Sorry.
alive. You haven't got a life, Richard, to get to, you know? Or is it Paulina's actually doing you dinner?
No, I gotta go.
All right, Richard, I'll speak to you soon. It's been great having you on board, Rich. And you had to put up with me for 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's
I
amazing,
know.
Rich.
2 hours yesterday, so.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Rich. Some people who dream of that. You know what Pauline says? Yeah, I'm glad you're talking to Carl and seeing Carl. I can put up with him for more than half an hour. Anyway, give my love to Pauline. I'll see you. Oh, by the way, was my article in the B&D?
No,
No.
wasn't in there.
Oh
And
my God.
Last week's there was no picture.
Oh my God. My column wasn't in this week. All right, then I'll have to have a go.
No, nothing in there.
All right, then I will find out why. All right, Richard.
Yeah, I met up with Gary Tiley today.
Oh, you're winding me up. Did you?
Yeah, I went. I was speaking to Paul the other day.
Yeah.
So he took me on his, he does like his tour of Cavikston.
Yeah.
So he said, "Oh, come on down, meet me in Victoria Park."
Yeah.
So I met him down there.
Ah.
So it's Gary Tiley. Do you know a guy, Hugh Allway, is it? I think he's something to do with Railways or something.
All right. Yeah, I think I know the one. Yeah.
As well.
Okay.
So he took me on a tour.
Ah.
But he was coming out about some other Roman remains in Barry.
Oh. Who, Gary?
Yeah.
All right.
He reckons, that Cavikston house?
Yeah.
Cavikston houses, well, they knocked it down, didn't they? And rebuilt it exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because it was listed, but they knocked it down and rebuilt it.
Right.
So according to him, that when they were doing the new foundations and everything, which obviously they did bigger trenches, because years ago they used to virtually dig down a foot, get a bit of clay, that was it.
Yeah.
That was your footing sort of thing. And when they went down, he reckons they found a skeleton dating back to Roman times and a lot of Roman pottery and stuff.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
But he reckons it was all sort of virtually etched up.
Yeah, definitely.
They
That
just
makes
carried
sense.
on. And started
That
building.
makes sense. That makes sense.
But that puts a bit more on your thing on Victoria Park,
Yes, it does. It does. Definitely.
And also, he was telling me he knows a guy who lives on the bottom end of Victoria Park.
Keep talking. I'm going to put my kettle on. Go on.
Yeah. So he said there's a guy that he knows. And he said, "Oh, come down to my house." He said, "I'm forever digging up this pottery and stuff."
Yeah.
Just digging up a lot of Roman pottery.
What, in his house?
Yeah, in the garden. And he was just
Where's
the other side of Victoria Park. So the south side of Victoria Park.
Yeah.
So you got the road. I can't think what they call it. Victoria Park Road, is it? Or Southview Terrace or something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's called Southview Terrace, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, right.
And he was finding bits of Roman pottery in his garden.
Ah. Nice to know more. Nice to know more. Oh, cool. You tell me more about it on Wednesday.
Yeah. So they took me out. I went in St. Cadoc's in the churchyard first. I'm gonna have a look around there. So I saw all the Thomas Eubanks grave and
Ah, yeah. Did that. We did that.
William James.
Anyway, Rich, I'm gonna have my break.
I'll leave you get on.
Tell me
I'll
more
have
about it
anyway.
on the Wednesday.
Yeah, see you next Wednesday.
Take care, Richard. Bye. Bye.
Bye. So long.
Cheers.
Ta-ra.
Break over now then.
Well, not really. He's taking most of it up. I'm just trying to get my kettle done. What's this bloody thing you're talking about, the Baltic?
You look at your first picture, your map.
Right. Yeah.
How does all the water get into the Baltic?
Oh shit! There's no Scandinavia. Oh right, we'll ignore that one. We'll ignore that.
Is that a schoolboy era?
Schoolboy era, bloody hell. That's quite shocking. Bloody hell.
So, question: was the Baltic Sea ever there in the first place, or was that filled up subsequently?
I think. Oh God, that's an area I've not sort of even thought about.
That's another rabbit hole you can go down.
Don't tell Putin, he'll want to invade it. he might, yeah, he might want to invade it. Stop asking silly questions. You know you shouldn't ask silly questions.
There you are.
Right, okay.
That will give you something to research now.
What? No, that's your research. You've got to find it out for me. Oh God. Is it me or has it got cold?
It has got colder.
Yeah.
The ice age is coming.
That,
Let's see if the snow's settled. Oh my bloody God.
I think you'll find it's the ash from the burning of the chickens.
No. No. There's nothing there. No. Let's get back with Doggerland. And your Baltic. So oh God. Well, from this, I don't know, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Very difficult one. Right. Okay, let's get back to it. Right, okay, image. Anne interfered with me then.
And she's not come back either.
Yeah, I got to remember. Do you know what? I got to remember where I was. It was right. Yeah, I know where I was. But I know where I was. Right. Okay. Oh, just don't tell her we're back. Just don't tell her. What it is? Roger. When he goes anywhere with Anne, he likes touching her leg.
yeah. No, I am. Actually.
Didn't Pat slap Peter across the face because he touched her ass?
That's right. When it's moving over, was it something?
Yeah.
She didn't like it.
Yeah, I don't think she liked it. I didn't think she liked it.
No.
Anyway, right. So right now, you know, we've one of the things in all of this, which is a very, very odd point.
We're not looking at any images at the moment.
Oh, okay. Oh, I mean, see what it is. Shut up, Rog. Shut up, Rog. You're not interested in anything. Got to say, Rog. Just shut up.
I know,
Right.
it's usual, yeah.
Henry's disappeared. Oh,
What?
there he is.
What is this?
Yeah.
A bloody comedy routine? Have you ever seen that 1961 film with
No.
Kenneth Connor and Sidney James and Donald Pleasant called A Carve Up?
No, I'm not that old.
So what?
It's a carve up. It's called It's a Carve Up.
Oh,
Oh, forget it. Just get on with your normal, boring lives. Right. Okay. So Have you
Don't
ever
touch my
thought
ass.
what Doggerland is? What you ever thought Dogger Bank actually? Oh God, I get it out in a minute. And why did you have to? It's all gone to pot already, right? Dogger Bank itself is not a big
Okay.
chunk of rock. It's
What?
actually left behind by glacial activity. It's a huge moraine, glacial moraine. So as this was all land and the ice is melting, that huge, basically there would have been a warm period and the glaciers would have left all the boulders, all the crap, all the clay, everything would have gone plonk and left it on the landscape. Just basic geography, basic GCSE geography. But it was a moraine that was left behind. So it was all compacted. It's not stone, it's all compacted. And you can think that itself, as a piece of evidence, is what I'm looking for is that underneath that moraine is going to be another land surface, a land surface that existed before the moraine, and so on and so on. So it's a compacted pillow of clay and material left by glacial activity. Now, whether that moraine was left there 12,000 years ago, I don't know. Maybe it was left there from other glacial activity previously, but it is a glacial moraine. Now, this itself is something that in a way was the antithesis of the landscape remaining land for a very, very long time. If the moraine was not there, it's likely that Britain would have been disconnected from Europe a lot sooner. But with the bank there, it's meant that this has been a gradual evolution where the water level has arisen.
Are you showing an image,
Now,
Carl?
oh God, why have I thought I put the image on there? Oh,
What?
no.
All I see is a bush.
Roger, I'm cocked up.
All I can see is your bush. Oh,
Well,
Oh God, this is
I think
not.
there's a little bit of connection trouble.
yeah. You got finger trouble, Carl. Press the wrong tit.
With,
Shut up. Thanks.
Look, there's the Baltic Sea.
What's that? It's like Formosa.
You've gone somewhere and you've got poor
It's
reception.
not a Formosa.
Is that rain or the snow?
Look, just everyone, shut up! I want to do this.
No, Carl, be good.
Roger, right,
Too much-
Roger, just
Too
because
much
you're
like me.
Roger, look, Roger, can you just let me talk, right? I
What?
chucked you out the Tuesday class because you kept on interfering and I kept on saying, Roger, I don't want you here, go away. You've joined my Thursday class and now this is happening here.
Well, you didn't mind me interfering with before. As a joke, you know. Huh?
Roger, I used to
No,
interfere with you all the time, but I don't want it happening now.
Oh,
Anne, shut up.
Yeah.
Thanks. Now, are we ready? Are we calm? Right. We now know what this looks like. Right. That's this big glacial
No, we
moraine.
look.
Pictures.
Yeah, you've got a picture in front of you.
It's just me. It's just I know you've got to share.
Oh my God! Please help me. Right,
There is a
Roger,
picture.
are you seeing an image of the North Sea?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Anne, I don't care if you can see it or not. Everyone else can.
What?
Right, good.
There's
I'm
nothing
glad
in
We've all frozen.
your
No,
focus on.
We're okay.
No, we're okay, Anne. We're okay, Jack. Oh God, please! I
Thank
can't
you.
believe it. You know what? Right before the break, I knew what I was talking about. Now it's gone to pot.
Just crack on.
Thank you.
Back on,
Thank
chap.
you. Oh, Oh, you know, if I criticise Jeremy Vine, I might have a 5-year prison sentence. That would be probably better off.
Mm.
You get free
Anyway,
food that way.
Oh,
free food, right? And also, I can keep my YouTube channel and keep teaching.
yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Now, the one thing about this, the hypothesis of the Storiga slide, which is just up there at the top of the screen, right, is a hypothesis that has only been with us about 20 years. And one of the biggest problems I feel with studying the whole of the Doggerland landscape, it's only come into mainstream Western archaeology in the last 30 years. And so many years we have lost being able to study this landscape. Now, this Storiga slide, some describe as a tsunami, I describe as a great tidal wave. It's basically has the same effect. This is an underwater landslide. And this is one of the writers talking about the Storiga slide. All these events were kicked off that the Storiga slide tsunami would have had a catastrophic impact on the contemporary coastal Mesolithic population. Britain finally became separated by the continent, and in cultural terms, the Mesolithic there goes its own way. I couldn't put it any better. The study of the Storiga slide suggests that the only remaining parts of Doggerland at the time of the Storiga slide were low-lying islands, but supported the view that the area had been abandoned at about the same time as the tsunamis. Now, that is basically saying what I've said, but it's saying it in a less dramatic way. It's saying that the islands had been abandoned. There was no choice. People were dead. Going on to this in another way as well, another view speculates that the Storiga tsunami devastated Doggerland, but then ebbed back into the sea. Is that what happened? I wouldn't follow that at all, because the evidence from Scotland tells us something else. However, the same writer of this tells us that even if the water did ebb back, the landscape was flooded 2 years later. I can't really see where they're getting that from, but there's different theories. The difference in distribution of this landscape is sometimes seen by people studying the evidence that has been trawled up over a very long time, which obviously we'd agree, and obviously we can go back and forth and try to understand what's going on in various different ways. Now this, I tell you what, this is yeah, they've been trawling these up for years. This is now, can you imagine trawling this up in a net?
Door knocker. Oh.
It's not a door knocker, you stupid man. It's a mammoth skull.
Mammoth skull.
What's that sound? Is that a Walter again?
Oh God, please stop it. That's rain. Right. All right. This, can you imagine getting this woolly mammoth skull in your fishing net? You're just thinking, well, what? It's huge, absolutely huge. Now, what I wanted to do is what I wanted to do is give you some of the concepts of this whole Doggerland thing, that what people thought in the past, not what we think now, not what I think now, but what people thought in the past. So we've known about Doggerland and the idea and the principles and people going back and forth. But the existence of what is now known as Doggerland may have been established a little bit before Clement Reid, and was certainly in the writing material of H.G. Wells in his book from 1897, known A Story of the Stone Age. That was his publication, 1897, A Story of the Stone Age, which he sets out the idea of Doggerland, not necessarily by name, but necessarily by principle. So let's see what he mentioned about this. This is H.G. Wells. A time when one might have walked dryshod from France, as we call it now, to England, and when a broad and sluggish Thames flowed through its marshes to meet its father Rhine. So this is what, interjection now, this is what we now know. How the hell did he know that in 1897? But Orson Welles and H.G. Wells were ahead of their time. Yeah. Did I say Orson Welles? I actually meant somebody else, didn't I? Oh God. Journey to the Center of the Earth. Who wrote that? Jules Verne.
Oh, yeah.
Why did I say Orson Welles? Jules Verne. Yeah. Jules Verne, Orson Welles. Shut up. Shut up. Orson Welles and H.G. Wells were ahead of their time. Right. You can tell I'm still not getting it. Right. So how did this is amazing that these people had this idea. When we talk about Jules Verne and Journey to the Center of the Earth, we mentioned that the other week, that this idea that there's microclimates and things can occur in, that's a really advanced concept. And H.G. Wells, with this very idea of land existing before Clement Reid, goes on to say that flowing through a wide and level country that is underwater in these later days, and which we know by the name of the North Sea, 50,000 years ago it was. Now, hang on a minute, the only thing he's got wrong so far is the date. But then again, he's actually right with the date, because it would have been dry land back then anyway. 50,000 years, if the reckoning of geologists is correct. So he's getting something from somewhere, and I think this is absolutely amazing. Though most of the action seems to occur in what is now Surrey and Kent, as he's writing in his publication, A Story of the Stone Age, and this is years before the Piltdown Mound Forgery. But he's obviously putting the link in between walking dryshod between Surrey, Kent, and France. So this is amazing that we've got that. And in many ways, we're talking about H.G. Wells and Jules Verne as being these great fantasists, but they're very different from the likes of von Daniken. Von Daniken sort of blames everything on everything else other than the real facts. But these two writers seem to have an insight into the times ahead and what would be, and so the remains of plants brought to the surface from Doggerland were studied in 1913. Remains of plants, not just animals, but the remains of plants were studied in 1930 by Clement Reid, and the remains of animals and work print from the Neolithic period had also been found. So what we're talking about is that even along the coast, there was a landscape that was still being inundated by water after the events of 8,500 years ago, even in the Neolithic period. In the Neolithic period, people were still losing land, as land is still being lost today. Very interestingly as well, to get an idea of what's going on with this landscape, when wonderful finds like the image in front of you, there's the anatomist and sort of biologist and sort of overall, he's into geology and all sorts of things. He works for the British Museum, Sir Arthur Keith. He wrote a book called The Antiquity of Man in 1915. Now, Arthur Keith is writing in 1915. Obviously, the book would have been penned in 1914, 2 years after Clement Reid. Now, Arthur Keith was the man who believed the Piltdown Mound forgery and gave it credence and a display cabinet in the British Museum. But Arthur Keith was very interested in the archaeological potential of the area of the English Channel. So he was interested. He thought maybe Clement Reid's got a point, but didn't take it any further because we got the war. Now, a little bit of information that we mentioned earlier on was they were trawling up all sorts of things off the Norfolk coast, off the Wash, and a little bit more information on one particular vessel that had hauled up this piece of peat. Let's give it a little bit more information. 1931, the trawler Kalinda hauled up a lump of peat whilst fishing near the Ower Bank. 25 miles east of Norfolk. The peat was found to contain a barbed antler point, possibly used as a harpoon or fish spear. And this was 8.5 inches long, just short of a normal size ruler. But it was antler. It was carved, a harpoon carved out an antler, and this was actually in the peat. This was in the peat, not sort of accidentally in the peat. It was actually bedded in the peat, and it was under the water. Right, this was trawled up. So this was dated to roughly 10. This is dated to roughly 12,000 years ago. Unfortunately, the antler was destroyed in the bombing of Hull Museum. The antler harpoon was destroyed in a bombing at the Hull Museum in 1941. So interesting. One thing I would say is that I've probably not given much of the reasons and wherefores. Obviously, after 1945, there should have been interest in this area. There should have been interest in this prehistoric landscape, but archaeology did take a few years to recover after the Second World War and after the First World War earlier. But it did take a little bit while to recover. And to be honest with you, people were not really interested in this type of stuff. In fact, they weren't really interested in the industrial landscape that was being lost around them either. They were very much interested in the Roman world, and they were very much interested in everything other than this. Now, just coming to the end of this, really, interest was reinvigorated in the 1990s by Brian E. Coles, who named the area Doggerland. So it was only really named Doggerland in the 1990s by Brian E. Cole. And she started producing maps of the area based on whatever we knew. Although she recognised that the current relief of the southern North seabed is not a sound guide to the topography of Doggerland, the topography has nevertheless recently begun to be reconstructed. And I've mentioned the seismic surveys between 2003 and 2007. And the work has actually been undertaken on behalf of the petrochemical companies and funded by them, by University of Birmingham and Vince Gaffney, who was of Time Team at that stage as well, and another chap by the name of Ken Thompson. And again, what we'll do, we'll look at that map that we sort of skipped over earlier on. Hang on. We go back to that map and we go there. This is that seismic map, and you can see Doggerland up in the top corner there. But the amazing thing is this area surveyed is only an area of 9,000 square miles, right? If they needed to get a map of the entire landscape, they would need to times that by 10, more like 100,000 square miles and even more, to actually get a full picture of this landscape. So this is all being funded as part of the Petro Geoservice and petrochemical companies out there as part of the Paleo Landscape project that we mentioned earlier on. The results of this survey were published as a technical monograph and popular book on the history and archaeology of Doggerland. And what we're starting to find is we're starting to really open up this landscape and to really understand it. We're seeing these seismic surveys, understanding all these earlier rivers and all these earlier lakes and all this information, which is absolutely amazing. Now, the noise that you can actually hear in the background is actually the rain. But what I would like to talk about further is something else that we mentioned earlier on. I'm going to take a slurp of my tea. And what that something else that we mentioned earlier on was earlier evidence. Now, a skull fragment of a Neanderthal dated to 40,000 years ago has been dredged up off the Danish Zealand coastline, and this was dredged up in 2009. A Neanderthal skull, fragments of a Neanderthal skull. So in other words, this landscape that we're talking about isn't a landscape that was familiar to our to people living 12,000 years ago. Again, it's not only familiar to lions that roamed across the landscape 150,000 years ago, it's familiar to lots of hominids that would have roamed the landscape all those years ago as well, 40,000 years ago. In March 2010, it was reported that recognition of the potential archaeological importance of the area could affect the future development of offshore wind farms. And that polder dike that we've actually seen earlier on, that floating sort of caisson, are the types of things that they use to actually create wind farms as well. And I don't agree with this statement that it's going to damage the archaeology. By bringing in these various developments of wind farms and so on, it gives the archaeologists an opportunity to examine the archaeology. And when you think about it, there's so much archaeology to examine, right? That I'm sure that we could possibly we could possibly spare a little bit of the land and examine it and understand it a lot more. So, this great landscape, we've got the landscape off the Danish coast, we've got the landscape of Netherlands, we've got all this, there's so much there. So, I'm sure we could develop some of it with wind farms and look at the archaeology at the same time. Get the archaeologists an opportunity to look at the landscape. That's what we're saying. A few more bits of information, and I'm just going to mention here that's with somebody's actually watching from somebody's actually on YouTube, and they're actually watching in Denmark at this minute. It's good. That's good. So a Danish person listening to this lecture is great. So in 2019, a flint flake partially covered in birch bark tar dredged up off the coast of the Netherlands, further on south. And this flint flake with a birch bark is basically, they believe, of Neanderthal technology. So, we're getting a great diversity of evidence within this great landscape. And I wanted to read this out as well. In July 2012, the results of the study of Doggerland has been something that has been, lots of universities are really into this now. Birmingham University, St Andrews, Dundee, Aberdeen, lots of universities are really into looking at this landscape. So it's great. There's lots of other funding going into it. And even University of Bradford. And I want to mention this following statement. And afterwards we're going to go off. This recording, and I've got to make an announcement to you all, not on the record. So none of you leave until I've come on to that. And Anne's actually watching on YouTube. That's a bit weird. So this is what we're saying about this. This is coming to the end of this lecture today. This is rounding this up. We have speculated for years on the lost land's existence from bones dredged up by fishermen all over the North Sea. But it's only since working with oil companies in the last few years that we have been able to recreate what this lost land looked like. We have now been able to model its flora and fauna, build up a picture of the ancient people that lived there, and begin to understand some of the dramatic events that subsequently changed the land, including the sea rising and a devastating tsunami. We'll let them have that. And finally today, since 2015, the University of Bradford's Europe's Lost Frontiers project has continued mapping the prehistoric landscapes of Doggerland and has used this data to direct the programme of extensive coring of marine paleo channels. And University of Bradford, the work, it actually involves Balna Cliff off the north west coast of the Isle of Wight. That's where they come into it. Sediment from the cores has provided sedimentary DNA as well as conventional environmental data, as we looked at when we looked at Boulder Cliff again. These will be used in a major computerized modeling program replicating colonization of the submerged landscape where it all was. And just one last thing, in June 2019, a team of scientists from the University of Bradford and Ghent University from the continent found hammerstone flint on the seabed 25 miles off the coast of Cromer, Norfolk. at a depth of 32 meters. And they believe that this hammerstone flint might be associated with a prehistoric settlement that is now 32 meters underwater. Ancient artifacts have been found by beachcombers in material dredged from the sea bottom 8 miles offshore and spread on a Dutch beach in 2012 as a coastal protection measure. When we looked at that on Tuesday, I skipped over it and then I realized the importance of what that was. What that is when they're dredging out at sea, they're bringing material inland. And in the case of the Dutch coastline, they brought the material out at sea to shore up as a protection measure the Dutch coast in 2012. In doing so, they're bringing some of the artifacts from out at sea inland, and people are actually looking at the artifacts inland, and they're finding lots of those artifacts that were once out at sea, and they can see this as part of this coastal protection measure, which they can now see along the Dutch coastline. So we will be looking at this. We will be looking at more about Doggerland in the future. Next week we will be looking at. I'm just gonna read this out. Next week we will be visiting. Hang on a minute. Oh yes. Hang on a minute. I've got my little list here somewhere. All right. Yeah. Next week we'll be looking at more native Mesolithic stuff, and I was hoping to look at some more Mesolithic stuff from Wales, but we'll see how that goes for next week, and we'll see how that develops. We've still got a site in Scotland to look at called the Lunar Warren Field, another lecture on Doggerland, and maybe that will be it for the Mesolithic period, but we've still got a few weeks of Mesolithic left. So on that note, I'm going to find out if anyone's got any questions, and Richard's not with us. Roger hasn't said anything for ages, so we're going to see. So, oh my God, Anne's gone.
What? You saw
Anne's ended up online.
Then?
Anne's ended up online with a Danish woman.
Oh.
She looks quite nice as well. Right, anyway, Henry, anything you want to say, darling?
Found a research document. It's Europe's Lost World, the Discovery of Doggerland. I was just going to email to you so you could actually have a look at your leisure. It's from the Council for British Archaeology 2009, research report number 160.
Well, bring it over and we'll have a little look to see if I've got it or not. That'll be great. Get that over to me.
Just going now.
Don't put it on chat. Put it on the email because
I've sent it as an email.
Okay, good.
With the other emails I've sent you.
Yeah, like 50 of them. Thank you for that. Anything else you want to say, my wonderful Henri?
No, that's fine. It was very interesting.
Thank you very much, my friend. And who else have we got now? Stephen. Stephen's been with me now tonight for nearly 3 hours.
I know.
Thanks for nothing.
It's very interesting lecture. It's actually far more enlightening than I had thought before. So thank you for that. I don't have any questions.
Okay, and thank you and guys, just hang on. When I've stopped the recording and gone off, I'll just mention something to you all. Anne will miss this. Roger will be particularly interesting. What I've got to say after this. Roger, anything you want to say, Roger, other than being annoying?
What's the difference in the depths when you cross Doggerland in the North Sea? Is it quite a noticeable, I would think, shallowing over the former Doggerland?
Well, we do believe that Doggerland. The Doggerland at high water. I do believe the bank itself is 18 meters below high water.
All right. No.
But then again, it could be 18 meters below low water. I'm not sure, but there is a sandbank which we mentioned on Tuesday, And the sandbank that that we mentioned on Tuesday is a sandbank off the coast that you can actually play cricket on, but it's not Doggerland Bank.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah.
and basically I've got a question online, and if you've got any questions you want to ask online, you're going to have to put them now before we finish. Our friend from Denmark, she says, I'm from west coast of Jutland, and I have always been fascinated by the stories about Doggerland. However, I got here really late and must watch replay before I got questions. So, okay, the lady called the lady called is it Christine, or is that our Christine? Anyway, the lady that's on here, I'm going to mention that we will be doing the next lecture next week at 7 o'clock if you want to join us. We've got another lecture on Doggerland, I think the week after that. And if you've got any questions, just get them over to me. Watch the video in full and just get the questions over to me. So I'm waiting for Anne, who's called Christine on you because she's got a few strange thingamajigs. Or is this Christian? I don't know. I'm getting confused. Anne, anything you want to say? We'll give her a minute. Oh, hang on. Anne's still online. What, we've got 5 people on you. Oh, Anne wants to come back on. Roger, we've got to listen to what Anne's got to say, and then that'll be it. We're waiting for Annie. Come on, we're waiting for Annie, and she's only come on to listen to my announcement. And
Oh, there she is.
Anne, come on, tell us, because we've all got. Stephen's got to have his fried fish. Henry's going to take the dog for a walk.
Yeah, cup of tea.
Roger's got to have a cup of tea with Jill. Anne, anything you want to say, Anne? Questions, quick, before we finish.
I'm back on again.
I'm back on. Anne's still online. Well,
Yeah.
we've got 5 people on you.
Oh,
Anne wants to come back on. Roger, we've got to listen to what Anne's got to say, and then that'll be it.
It's a pity. It's a pity.
We're waiting for Annie.
Am I?
Come on.
I.
Oh, there she is.
Anne, come
I'm
on.
here.
Because we've all got.
Thanks.
Have his fried fish. Henry's going to take the dog for a walk.
Yeah, cup of tea.
Have a cup of tea with Jill.
No.
Anne, anything you want to say? Anne?
No, it
Questions,
was.
quick,
I'm back on again. I'm back on.
It's,
Oh my God! I can't turn you off.
Roger, we're going to listen. Anything you want to say, just spit it out.
It was more interesting when I left the room.
How do you know that?
The end bit was interesting. So yes, it's food for thought, all about, were the trees washed away, and so they didn't cut them down.
I'm sure we did that an hour ago.
Oh, yes, it's very exciting.
Do you know, Anne, right? I've never had that happening before, right? You're answering questions with me online, right?
Well,
And I'm trying to talk to you.
Oh, sorry, but that lady, Vividness it was. She didn't put a name, but that's nice, isn't it? Getting somebody on from Denmark.
Yeah, well, it is. We got 3 other people on there. So Vividness says, finally, awesome. We'll try to make it. Bye all. I will head back to watch from beginning. So there we go. Vividness has gone. So what I'm going to do, I want you 3 to stay on, 4 to stay on a minute. I'm going to make a little announcement. I'm going to shut down the I'm going to shut down this feed. I'm going to quickly, what I always do at the end of the lectures when you guys ain't here, I always read out the stuff in the chat box, which is actually nothing new. On your map, you have water in the Baltic Sea, but where did that come from? Thanks a lot. We've already done that. So what we're going to do, we're going to finish this now. Thank you everybody for watching on YouTube and obviously the lecture. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to join and don't invade any foreign countries south of Poland. Other than that, we're going to finish that lecture, and I'll tell you